Well, there's other people here, but Chaim Tzvi is one of the active participants. Chaim Tzvi.
And he'll get shot down from you.
Okay, so we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, Dr. Hill, right at the bottom is one of the active participants. Oy vey.
And he'll get shot down.
1 second.
I've never heard that before.
Okay, so we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, Dr. Hill, right at the bottom is one of the active. Okay, no, what happened was the YouTube, which it's live on, is delayed. So I had to mute the volume. Usually it's automatically muted. I don't know why it wasn't.
If you say something wrong, you have time to
Correct it, yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Can you get my pointer? We will get started immediately. Dr. Hill Gemara, Taner Bon, the Gemara read, the Bryce read, Ein Boydkin, you're not supposed to be Boydik Chametz, Loy La'ar Chama, not using sunlight, V'loy La'ar Alavana, and not using moonlight, V'loy La'ar Avuka, and not the light of a big torch, and La'ar in there. So even before you go weiter, if you're supposed to be Boydik Chametz at nighttime, the night before Erev Pesach, so where are you going to find Ar HaChama? So there's actually a shaila in the Rishonim what this means. It doesn't mean somebody got up from work early that day, and because of that he wanted to start early, or and they hold that you're allowed to be boidik early if you want, or it doesn't mean you didn't have a chance to be boidik at the time of B'dikas Chametz, and you were only able to be boidik next morning. Or going back to the Gemara we learned, if you rented a $15,000 Airbnb in Miami and you expected it to be bodik, when you arrive you find out that the owner wasn't bodik, and now you're stuck. So then you have a chance of being bodik to the Florida sunlight. Of course, in Florida you would be able to be bodik early in the morning with sunlight because you get the sun in the east. If it was California, you'd have to be bodik with sunlight in the afternoon. You get the sun in the west. That's right. That's right. So Zok Gemara. So you're not supposed to use any of these items, only an there. Why? Zok Gemara. Let me see if I could find the place. Mipnei, and now we're finally on Daf Chesed Aleph. Mipnei she'or haner yafa lebedika. The or of a single candle is the best thing to use. Why is it so good? So Rashi l'kamei mefarish my mel yusa me'avuka. Why is one single nair better than a torch, which seems to give a lot more light off? Even though we don't have a black and white proof, we do see that the psukim seem to indicate that. Shenamar, it says, Shivas Yomim Sa'or Lo Yimotzi Bevatechem. 7 days, the Gemara Mamash loves this limud because it's like the third or fourth time that the Gemara is repeating it. Shivas Yomim Sa'or Lo Yimotzi Bevatechem. Vaymer, it says, when they were looking to find the Becher of Yosef, they started with the Amtachas, with the knapsack of the oldest child, and then they found it in Binyamin.
Getting up, right?
Have the word chipus associated with the Isra V'Yimotzi. V'Omer, and then we have another pasuk that associates chipus with Neres. V'Ezahi achapes es Yerushalayim b'Neres. Hashem said, I'm going to search through Yerushalayim for Averis with Neres. And then the next pasuk connects Neres to Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam Chayfes Kol Chadribah. So that's how we know through this sequence of Hekeshim, we learn that to solve the problem of Val Yimotzi, you should use it there. Exactly what was the circumstance in which someone would propose even to use the sunlight to make the dikah? If it was outdoors in your yard, you have plenty of sunlight. You don't have to be boidik there at all because chotzer ain't a tzricha b'dika. Why? Even if there's going to be chametz in your chotzer, we can assume that birds will come and eat it up. Ella, what it must mean is where you want to use the sunlight. Ella be'achsadra. You want to use sunlight in some type of gazebo. Correcting Gemara. That why is the Bryce saying that you shouldn't use sunlight there? Indeed, that is the right way to make a badika on an achsadra. It's with the sunlight. So what is the Bryce referring to? What are the circumstances in which the Bryce is saying that one may not use sunlight? It's a window in a room, and there's sunlight coming in through the window. Exactly what are the circumstances? If it's right opposite the window, so it's in direct sunlight, well, which Rava told us the proper way to be boidik is using the sunlight. It must be off to the sides, I guess, in the shady area. And there is what the Brisa says, you shouldn't use sunlight to be boidik, you should use an air. The next thing that the Brisa listed as something that you should not use the b'dikas chametz is an avuka, a torch. What's wrong with a torch? It gives off a lot of light. For Amar Rava said, it says in Chavakuk, the Torah is talking about, the Navi is talking about how good it will be for tzaddikim. V'noiga ka'or tiyeh, the brightest sunlight that we have, that's the light that's going to shine on the tzaddikim. Karnaim miyad eloi. Karnaim, Rashi says, is miloshen karan or. The glare, the shine, will go from the Rebbeinu Shalom to the tzaddikim. V'sham chavir nuzoy, and that's where their strength will be hidden. Lama tzaddikim doimin b'fnei shchina. How are the tzaddikim compared to the shchina? B'ner b'fnei avuka, like a small light in front of a large light. So bigger is better. So why should an avuka not be good? And another thing is, when you make avdala, you're supposed to use an avuka. So if anything, an avuka is wonderful, creates a lot of light. So why should you not use it for b'dikas chametz? Very simple. A small light you can use in cracks and crevices. It's safe to move around there. You can't take a big torch into a small little area. An avuka is so bright, you need to hold it behind you to light up the path in front of you. If you held it in front of you, you would be blinded by the light itself. So a candle you can hold in front of you and you can still see properly. But when you hold a torch, the light needs to project from behind you, because otherwise, if it's in front of you, it will hinder your sight itself. Does anybody ever drive in a car overnight and your wife turns the light on because she wants to read something, and you say, "I can't see"? That's what it means. So the avuka, you have to use it from behind you, because otherwise it'll blind you. Hi boys, low boys. You're much more afraid to examine things closely when you're using an avuka, because it could catch on fire. A little candle, it's much more controlled. A candle tends to burn in a pretty steady flame. An avuka tends to flicker a lot. So again, it's much easier to examine for small bits of chametz with a steady flame. This thing of high boys, low boys is very real. When I was in Philadelphia yeshiva, there was a Philadelphian, a boy who lived in Philadelphia, who was not from a frum family, who went home to make b'dikas chametz, and he decided to check underneath his bed with the candle. Anyway, 3 hours later, his family asked yeshiva if they could move in for Pesach because their house burnt down. You're not supposed to check under a mattress with a candle. Now, actually, before we go back to, we have to discuss a flashlight. Is a flashlight a good thing to use for b'dikas chametz? So there are those who learn that one of the chesronos of sunlight, why you're not supposed to use sunlight, is because there's generally a lens, like a window, that's being mafsik. Most flashlights have a lens, and for that reason, maybe you shouldn't use flashlights. But I believe the consensus of the seminar, use a candle, but wherever a candle isn't safe, best off using a flashlight. If the light is steady on it, most of the chesronos that are discussed here in the Gemara, the flashlight does not have. The flashlight does not have any of the chesronos of the avuka. The only consideration why a flashlight wouldn't be good is it might have the problem of chama, which means there's a lens in between. But if a shaila being boidik properly, avada, you're supposed to use a flashlight.
Yosy, I believe Rabbi Lowy holds that a flashlight is a lekatchila.
Okay. Better than a candle? So you tell me that Rabbi Lowy uses a flashlight?
Yes.
Candle? Rabbi Loy uses a flashlight.
I don't know, but good question. No, I'm sure he uses
now
a
if you're
candle
running
simply als Messiah.
a fire, you have to be maybe this year for sure you should use a flashlight because you have a mask and a flame.
I'll give you 5 minutes. That's 5 minutes for instigating, but I'm pretty certain that the Rav continuously recommends flashlight, especially he says in
Really?
houses like today, when it's larger, you should be checking in advance, 3 and 4 days in advance of Dikas Chametz, because to leave everything for one night is almost impossible. But I will check.
So Rabbi Loy says that at Chila, when you make B'dikas Chametz, you should use a candle. You should use a flashlight.
For sure in advance, when you're not making the bracha, the 3 days in advance, the night of, when you're only going to check 1 or 2 rooms, then maybe you could use the candle. But for the hard checking under the beds and the crannies, I think the Rav says flashlight. I'm pretty certain.
I would like that because all the B'dikas Chametz kits that I get, they're usually just a waste of time. If they set the flashlight along, that would be pretty good.
Well, and with batteries, and include the batteries.
Include the batteries, that's right. Okay, go on.
I will check. I think I have Hilchas Pesach on our loop collection. I'm going to check it up right now to see what he says.
Look, what Rabbi Kiva is saying.
Yeah. But on the night of it's not listed a flashlight.
They didn't have flashlights in those days. Yeah. It's not on the list. I hear.
Right, but if you're going to,
So to look, a flashlight's better, but to be kind of mitzvah b'dika.
you're using it in there.
So have a flashlight as well.
And what's wrong to use a
Okay,
flashlight
as well. I hear.
in places where you couldn't get into?
I hear.
It's not like a flashlight is also, can't be used as a flashlight.
Okay, good. Continue more about it. Kol makom she'ein machnisim by chametz. Any place you don't bring chametz, you don't have to make a b'dika. So kol makom, what's this kol? What additional place that I might not have thought about would also be potter from b'dikas chametz. Kol makom l'suyim mai. So let's see how to tell you about them. Chayrei bayis el yodim. In those days, they had built-in cabinets. What were the built-in cabinets? If there was a hole in the wall, that was their built-in cabinet. So there were holes in the walls that were very high, that were hard to access. There were holes in the wall that were very low, that were hard to access. So since those are areas that are difficult to access, we assume people didn't store their chametz in there. The gaka yitzia. You still see it nowadays. People have like a little shed that's connected to their house. So they have an inclined roof that connects to their house, and underneath it there's a shed. People keep wood there or whatever it is. So such a shed, the shed itself might have to be checked for chametz, but the roof, being that it's on an incline, we assume no chametz remained on it. The gaka migdal, or if you have a standalone storage structure with a pointy roof, again, the roof itself will assume does not need b'dika because anything would have rolled off. A refes poker or a barn, we don't need to worry about chametz, Rashi says, because if there's chametz there, the animals will eat it. Velulin, and place where you keep chickens, again, any drops of chametz, any crumbs of chametz will be eaten there. Umatvein, and places where you store straw, Rashi says, "Dema darkoi shel chametz." What business does chametz have in such a place? No one's having chametz there. And the same thing goes for v'oitrus yain, v'oitrus shemen, places where you store wine or you store oil. Those are all places that you normally will not need b'dika because if people don't bring chametz there, entry b'dika. Now, our Mishnah, the Gemara is going to explain, we're talking about, our Mishnah says you need b'dika, those are only the oitris that you actually use from during a meal. But the real storage houses, storage facilities, there you don't need to worry about finding chametz there. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Mita hachelekes b'soich habayis, umafsekes. The way Rashi learns, and Tosfos disagrees, but the way Rashi learns is you had a bed that you're using as a mechitza. If you go upstairs in the Ezras Noshim, you'll see that we don't have a wall to make the room into 2 rooms. We used makeshift. We used tables there. So it's the same thing. If you have a bed that you're using as a mechitza in the room. Now Rashi says the fact that we're using it as a mechitza in the room is irrelevant to our discussion. It just happens to be that people used to use beds as dividers between rooms. Tosfos argues and explains why it would be relevant. But Rashi holds it's a bed that people often would use as partitions in rooms, umafsekes, and they happen to be on legs. It's not a mattress on the floor. Rather, there's a bed frame that raises the bed up, and therefore it's possible to find chametz underneath it. You'd have to be boidik under that bed. We're mini fractal Gemara. Multiple kashas. Chur shebein adam lachaverei. Holes in the wall between your home and your neighbor's home. So if you shared a block wall and there was a hole in the wall, so it's like a shelf, that's what we call the built-in shelf. Zeh boidik ad makom shiyadim agas. This person should be boidik deep because those walls were really, really thick. They can be 3-4 feet thick. So you have to be boidik as far as your hand could reach, maybe 2 feet in, because that's where you might have placed chametz. V'zeh boidik ad makom shiyadim agas. Vashar mevatle belivai. And anything in the middle, so if it was a really, really thick wall, that there was a core area that neither side can reach, you don't have to worry about chametz there, and you can just be mevatlet. That's not Jewish only passes on a pasuk, but different Musar is one of the Musar learns that when you're looking for affairs, you be boidik achiyad bagas, you take care of yourself and mind your own business, and let the ender take care of mashiyad bagas, and everything else is none of your business. So Dr. Gemara, and chametz is always used as a mashal to chet. So when you wait for chet, stick to your part, let him take care of his part. Abshimon ben Gamliel says, mita hachelekes b'soich habayis. So the same mita that we said earlier, you have to be boidik underneath it. And ve'etzim avanim sturim that there was, if you had stuff stored underneath that bed, umafsekes ein tzricha b'dika. It does not need b'dika. So it's a steer because before we said, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said tzricha b'dika. Here it said ein tzricha b'dika. So kasher mita. It's shver because here it says that you don't have to be boidik under the bed. There it says you do. And kasher churin achurin. Earlier we said that you don't have to be boidik in the churin, and now here it says each person has to be boidik at chiyadei magas. So tomorrow it's not shver. Churin achurin like kasher habi loy v'tasai v'habamitzi. Where do we say you don't have to be boidik at all? In the built-in cabinets. That's only if it's up high or down low, where people are not inclined to store anything there. When the Brisa says each neighbor has to be boidik as far as they can, those are speaking by holes that are in the strike range, right, from the shoulder to the knees. In the strike range where it's convenient to use, in those areas you do have to be boidik. Mita like kasha. It's not shver. Why in the first Brisa it says tzricha b'dika, and in the second Brisa it says ein tzricha b'dika. Had the medalya, had the mitasai. It depends on how tall the bed was. If the bed was tall and you can really store stuff underneath it, then of course you have to be boidik. The Brisa that says that you don't have to be boidik is referring to beds that are very, very low. And they're hard to use. It's easy to use, but the soif it's very low, even though there is some space underneath it, but it's very inconvenient to use, and therefore we don't need to worry about someone having put chametz there. Frag the Gemara. Are you saying that wine storehouses don't need bedika? But Tanya we learned wine storehouse do need bedika, and it's oitrus shemen that ain't tzarich bedika. So the Gemara the Brisa that says, and our Mishnah that says that you have to be boidik a storehouse of wine is only if it's a storehouse that you actually will go to during a meal to replenish wine if need be. In fact, Gemara ihach shemen nami. So if it's your place where you get oil from directly for your meal, why over there do you not need a bedika? So there's a very big difference. Shemen yesh kval achila. When people are making a meal, they know how many guests they have, and they know how much oil they're going to need to dress the salad or for whatever purposes they're going to need. They know in advance how much oil they need, and there's never a need to go down in the middle of the Suda to replenish oil. But yain and kavel shusiyah. If the item is in the mood, they could polish off. So therefore, wine is very difficult to predict how much wine you're going to need, and it's common that in the middle of a meal, one would have to go to the storehouse to get more wine.
No, I would have thought the opposite. Because wine, you put a limit on, no matter what.
Wine, you what?
You put a limit on.
In those days, they didn't have the certification of smart serve. The oil drank, wie viel hat sich gelost? Sagt the Gemara weiter. That's very good. They didn't. Chaim Tzvi says in those days they didn't have to meter their wine because no one drove, so it was much safer. Sagt the Gemara. So yain and kavel shia. Tanya Abchia. We're assuming to see the same thing applies to herring. Herring also. Can you listen? I'm all back. It's safut herring. I'm all nished. We're going to see. All of these concepts that we know are in the Gemara. Zog to Gemara, Tanya B'chia. Also, oitrus sheichar bebavel koitrus yain beretz Yisrael. In Babel, they were beer drinkers, and therefore you had to be boidik. You'd have to be boidik there because sheichar is something that was very commonly used in Babel, and it would just be like wine in Yisrael, where you could never know how much more will be brought out. This has got to be speaking about non-chametz beer, because if it was chametz beer, you have to be boidik there anyway. So it's probably non-chametz beer, and since it could be used in abundance and it's hard to know how much to prepare before a meal, you'd have to check there for chametz. Omar B'chista, this is where we're talking about arson. Beidogin, a place where you store your fish, ein tzarich v'dika. You don't have to be boidik. In fact, the Gemara about Tanya tzrichin v'dika, we learned that your fish storehouses you do have to boidik. If we're talking about a piece of salmon, a piece of gefilte fish, there you know based on your guess how many pieces to serve. But herring, little fish, you can never know. If the bronfun is good and the lekich is good, the herring food dochet. So therefore, you'll always have to be boidik your places where you store small fish, because it's likely that in the middle of the meal that had to be replenished. Amar Rabba Barahuna, Be Milchi, the place where you store your salt, Uve Kiri, and the place where you store your wax, Rashi says, because neighbors are also needed throughout a Suda, Tzarech Badika, because these are all places that you likely visited during the meal. Amar Papa, Beit Tzivi, what about the place where you store your wood, Uve Tamri, or your dates? Tzarech Badika, you also have to be boidik there, because that's also places where one might go during a meal. Tana, if you have a very thick stone wall, you're not mechuyev to stick your hand deep into the wall to be boidik, like we just said earlier. Why not? So this isn't speaking about a wall. We're soon going to see what we're speaking about. So at first glance, it seems to be speaking about a wall, and says you don't have to put your hand in. My sakana. What is the sakana of putting your hand into the hole in the wall? There might be a scorpion in that hole, and when you stick your hand in to check for chametz, you might get a sting from the scorpion. Well, how did you use the hole in the first place to store your chametz? If it was safe to put your chametz there, then it's surely safe to get it out. That the Brayz in Mechayiv Noisa is not speaking about a wall that's standing. It's speaking about a wall in your house that fell down. And the question is, do you have to avoid it there? In fact, the if the wall actually fell down, why do I need to be boidik at all? Forget the sakanas akrev. I shouldn't have a chalal chiv to make medika, because what now we learned, chometz shenafla alav mapoilus, a chometz where a wall collapsed on it, hareyu kemavur. That's considered like it's mavur already because it's not accessible. So oy bezoi, how could you tell me the reason why you don't have to stick your hand in is because of the sakanas akrev? L'chatchila, there's no chiv to check for chametz under a fallen wall. So there's a big difference. Hasam, when do we say you don't have to check for chametz under a fallen wall? It's she'ein hakelev yochel l'chapis acharav. That's because the dog couldn't get it. It was deep down, buried in the pile. There ain't a chanami. You don't have to be mevayired. But hacha, the discussion that we have now, whether or not you have to stick your hand into a fallen wall to pull out chametz, is kishakelev yochel l'chapis acharav. It's not buried so deeply, and a dog would be able to get it out. Therefore, you're mechuyev to mevayer it, and therefore you would have a chiyuv to check with your hand, if not for the fact that it was a sakana. So Tosfos points out something very interesting. Tosfos hachach kishakelev yochel l'chapis acharav ulakach einei poter. The reason why you're not poter l'chatchila from being boidik this is because you could really access it, and the only reason why we potered you in the Brayz is elam of pnei sakana. Correct Tosfos. The mashma gabe mapoilas the makelev yochel l'chapis acharav einik mevuyer v'tzorich levayer. The Brayz says if a wall falls on it and a dog cannot access it, then you're potter. So you could be able to make a dik from there that if it was accessible, you'd be mechuyev to check after it. Why isn't there a ptur of a limifter in pnei sakonas akriv? Why isn't there a ptur there al sakonas akriv? The Brayz seems to be mashma that any mapoilos that fell on chometz, if you could get it, you have to get it. Why don't you work for an akriv? And that amiri, a very important distinction. Shiny hasam the vada ike chometz hitrichu chachamim lahasker poilim. If you know there's chometz under the pile, If it's so deeply buried a dog can't get it, you can abandon it. If it's not so deeply buried, you have to dig it out. Our brisa that says that you don't stick your hand into a hole because you might get a sting, that's if you don't know there's chametz there. The shayla is you have a chiv to make bedikas chametz. You don't have a chiv to make bedikas chametz for the unknown because of a sakana. But if you know there's chametz there, then you'd actually have to clear away the pile and get rid of that chametz. So that's the big distinction. You don't have to risk yourself to stick your hand into a pile of rubble if you don't know there's chametz there. But if you know for sure there's chametz there, Zoktosis, you would have to. So Zok the Gemara, why are we concerned about sticking our hand into a pile that we might get injured while we're doing a mitzvah? How can you get injured while you're doing a mitzvah? Shluchim mitzvah ain't in the We have a rule that shluchim mitzvah don't get damaged, so why are we worried? On Rabashi, the problem is what's going to happen if he in the wall he put chametz, but he also left a needle there once, and he's being by the chametz. You know what? While I'm being by the chametz, maybe let's see if I could find my needle. Did anybody ever find something that they were looking for all year during B'dikas chametz? Did it ever happen to you that you were looking for something you didn't know where it was, and during B'dika you found it? So this guy, he lost his needle. No, I'm being by the anyway. Let me see if I can go find my needle. And that's not a mitzvah, and we're afraid there he'll get damaged. In fact, the Gemara.
Not something that is common to get missing.
Right, so the Gemara is going to bring up that svara later on. Excellent. Hi Gavna, Lav Mitzvah. Are you telling me that if you have dual intentions, side to look for the chametz and side to find your needle, that's not shluchim mitzvah, and that won't be covered by the exemption of shluchim mitzvah? How could you say that? We learned that Vatanya we learned ha'omer sel azul tzedakah. If someone said, I want to give this money to tzedakah, b'shvil sheyichye b'ni, in the schos that my son who's not well should be healthy, oy she'eye ben olam haba, or I want olam haba. So he has some personal interest in the tzedakah, but he's still giving tzedakah. Zok the Gemara, what is the halacha of such a fellow? Harezet tzaddik gomer. He's a tzaddik gomer, Zok Rashi. Harezet tzaddik gomer b'dover v'lo yamrinin shaloi l'shma isa. You don't say that he did it shaloi l'shma. Rather, alakayim mitzvahs boyroi. He was makayim the mitzvah of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Shetzivo lazos tzedakah, who commanded him to do tzedakah. U'mischaven afla nos atzmoi. He also hopes to get a little bit out of it. Sheyiskaba la'olam haba, sheyichibanav, a tax receipt to the epis. There's nothing wrong with that. So therefore, Dr. Kumar, how could you tell me that that you don't have the protection of shluchim mitzvah if you also want to find your needle? In fact, you do have the protection of shluchim mitzvah.
Tax receipt is not part of it.
Okay.
It can, because the tax receipt, we didn't have any outcome.
That's right. So Dilma, basar de badak asal basra. You're right. If you simultaneously you're looking for the needle as well as the chametz, that's a tzaddik gomer. But we're concerned that even after you finish being by the chametz, you'll continue to look for your needle. That continuing search, there's no mitzvah in it. It's pure personal, and that we're afraid will put you into a danger. You might get stung by a scorpion. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, you might get pricked by your needle too, and think it's a scorpion. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, mishum sakanas hanachrim. The concern is nachrim, because if you're poking around inside a wall at night, the goyim are going to think that you're trying to cast a spell on them, and then they're going to come and kill you. Uplimahi, and it's using the svara of the chacham plimoi. The Tanya, he said, chur sheben Yehudi larmoi. If there's a hole, plimoi.
In the Shabbos Agudo.
Okay, plimoi. So Tanya, chur sheben Yehudi larmoi. If there's a hole in between a Jewish home and a Goyish home, boidik ad mokim sheyodim agash. You only boidik until you could reach fashar, and the rest mavata beliboy. But plimoi omer, Mr. Bergman is showing me from the Yoitris. It says ploim is makeup from being boidik in a shared wall between you and a guy. Kol atma ain't a boidik. You're not boidik at all. Mepnei sakana, because it's dangerous. My sakana, what is the danger? Your name is sakana kshofim. If you're going to say it's a sakana because the guy thinks you're going to be casting a spell on him, and then he's going to come kill you. Well, on ki yishtamish, hey ki yishtamish. Then how could you use it? If you're using it during the year and the guy is not going to come kill you, he's not going to come kill you because you're being boidik. So there's a big difference. Hazim ki yishtamish yamama Unahira. When am I using it? I use it during the day and it's light. And therefore, the guy won't think, he won't be paranoid that I'm trying to cast some spell. But Badikas Chometz, when are you doing that? At night, you're using a flame, and that's already scary. That will lead the guy to suspect that you're trying to cast a spell and they'll come kill you. So that takes care of that problem so far. So it's not a shlich mitzvah, we're afraid it'll be nizik. They don't get damaged. So why does plain hold is a problem? So tomorrow, like Chaim Tzvi said, when you're playing with fire, and when you're being by the chometz, you're playing with fire. When you're playing with fire, that's different. So if you're doing something that will cause suspicion by a goy, that's shchi chazeka. Shenemar, where do you see that if it's shchi chazeka, even a shlich mitzvah is in danger? Because when Shmuel was told by the Rebbeinu Shalom to go anoint David as the king, right under the nose of Shalom Melech, Shmuel, how could I go? If Shaul hears that I'm coming and I'm anointing the new king right under his nose, he's going to kill me. So Hashem said, you know what, you're right. Come bring a carbon, make it look, thank you. Make it look like you're trying to bring a carbon. So Mr. Bergman just showed me in the Yoitros of Shabbos HaGadol, it says, Peleimoi is Meko, Shema Yoimar, Ha'ovid Gechavim Keshafai V'Chavlorei. So you see in the Yoitros of Shabbos HaGadol, we quote Peleimoi Shita, who holds that you should not make Badika on a joint wall. So you see from me that, so he's bringing me right from the Art Scroll that it's Peleimoi. I wonder what the Art Scroll says over here. He probably says Peleimoi as well.
I don't know, man.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Could you explain what Halloween was? Like what exactly the conversation between Shmuel and what it all meant? You know what? I forgot about that.
How you talking that Shmuel was able to correct your bunch slip?
Yeah, like how did that work? What did that come from Shmuel initially, and what was?
I don't know. That's a good child. That's a very good child. What was the shakli retired between Shmuel? Did Hashem? Or maybe if Shmuel would have listened to their Bnei Yisrael without questions, Hitaka would have been saved. But now that you're asking, it's like it says by the Parsha of Shemitah. But the Parsha of Shemitah it says Ma Noichal. If you ask Ma Noichal, so Hashem says, I'll make it that it should be plentiful. And if you wouldn't have asked, what would have happened? If you wouldn't have asked, it would have been Oichel Kimmel Misperch B'Meil. Now that you asked, not to sit down over here. Now you need to have more non-names. But I don't know. It's a good child. He's up the Heilige Gemara weiter. Boimene Mirav, Hani b'nei Beirav. These Talmidim of the yeshiva that don't live near the yeshiva, they dayu babaga. They live away in the meadows. They live in the valley. So traveling at night to come to yeshiva is a little bit dangerous. Are they allowed to risk their lives? Rashi says, Hashkem v'harav, can they get up early when it's still dark? Or in the evening when they go home? Do they need to be afraid of mazikin? Maybe they shouldn't come to yeshiva. Maybe they should just zoom in because it's simply too dangerous to come in person. Zok to Gemara. So what did he answer? Amalahu. Rav answered back, Nesu, let him come. Are you worried? Alive al tavari. I take responsibility for any concern. I take responsibility. They're not going to be hurt. So that's coming to yeshiva. Nezel mai. What about when they leave? I understand that they can come to yeshiva, but that's when they're coming to learn. But are they allowed to leave at night? Nezel mai. Can they rely on the mitzvah even when they're going home? So Zok Gemara, Amar lo Yadan. He said, I don't know. But Itmar, we had our Gemara. Amar Abelazar, Shluchei mitzvah, Eina Nizaikin, Loi Bahali Chasan, Loi Bachazi Rasan. So you see that even going back would not be dangerous. Kaman, who's that going like? Ki Hai Tana, the Tanya, Isi ben Yehuda Aimer. Isi ben Yehuda says, Klape Sha'amar Torah, V'lo Yachmod Ish Atzecha. When the Torah is talking about people being oila regel, if all the men abandoned their cities to go up to Yerushalayim, what stops the enemy from coming in when all the Yidden are gone and taking over their land? So we learn from that that first they're not even going to come after your land, but besides not coming after your land, not only will your land not be in danger, but even your metaltalin will not be in danger. It won't be in danger from a chulda. So from the S, adds not only artzecha, but also your metaltalin are going to be protected when you're going to be oila regel. We can make a kal v'chomer. Uma elu shedarkan lozuk. Madach these animals where it's very normal for them to get damaged, for them to get hurt. Eino nizoikin. They won't be damaged when they're going to be oila regel. But the other humans that are by nature more protected and safer. She'ein darkan lozuk. They don't normally get hurt. Alachas kama v'kama. Surely they won't get damaged. Ainly alab halicha. You only see here that when you're going to be oila regel, you're not in any type of danger. B'chazor minayin. How do you know that when you're returning from being oila regel? How do you know that they're also protected and you have the concept of shluchah mitzvah in nizokin? Talmud loimer ufanisa v'boiker v'halachta lo yolecha. After Yom Tov, you'll go back to your homes. Malamed teaches you shetelech. When you go home, v'timtza oyalecha b'shalom. So the Torah is telling you on your way back, you're going to be fine. Now that the Torah tells us that when you come home, everything's going to be fine. So the Torah is telling you that even on your way home, there'll be no problem. Why do we need these psukim to tell you that you're protected when you're going to be oila regel? If you're protected when you're coming home from being oila regel, on the chazara, on the return, surely you're protected going there. Any person that has karka, oila regel. The chiyuv to be oila regel is only for a landowner. If you're not a landowner, you don't have to be oila regel. A landowner in Eretz Yisrael. We learned a couple of days ago about Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir, I think it was, who lived in Tzivin, and Tosha says one of the reasons why he wasn't oila regel is because maybe he didn't own land in Eretz Yisrael, and that's why he wasn't oila regel. Amar Rab Avin bar Rab Ada Amar Bitvak. Why is it that you don't have the geshmak of sweet pears like they have in Tveria, but in Kinneret? How come they don't have those in Yerushalayim? Right. That's right. That's right. Well, they can send their money there. So why don't only if you have land? Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'll need real estate. That's not real estate. Not real estate. That's not real estate. So why don't they have the super sweet Paris in Yerushalayim? It's Kedei Shelo Yehu Oile Regalim Oimrim, so the people who are Oile Regal shouldn't say Il Male Lo Yalinu Elo Lechel Paris Kenusha Yerushalayim Dayenu. We don't want people who are coming to Oile Regal to say, oh, even if I only came for those pairs, it was worth it, because it's going to take away the Shema. They're going to say, they're going to be happy that they went not for the mitzvah, but rather to enjoy the delicious pears. Similarly, why are there no chamit Tveria in Yerushalayim? Why are they in Tveria? Again, people are going to say, yeah, forget the Alila Regalos, the whole thing just for the chamit Tveria. And that will end up being an Alila Shalai Shema, and therefore you don't have these diversions. We say that you need 2 shuras per martev. The Mishnah is talking about Makam Shem Mechlisa B'Chometz, and all of a sudden the Mishnah asks, and why do you have to be by the Kamartiv? Whoever said that you have to be by the Kamartiv? This is how you have to read the Mishnah. It's a place where you don't bring in chametz. Ain't tzarich badika. You don't have to avoid it. But v'oitrus yain, v'oitrus shemen nami ain't tzarich badika. And oitrus yain, oitrus shemen also don't need badika. Uvameh amru shtei shuras b'martiv. So where did they say that you do have to be avoid the 2 rows in the martiv? Mokem shemechnisim by chametz. A place where you bring chametz into upamistapik. It's only referring to a martiv that you use during a meal, and that's the martiv that you need to make bedikas chametz on. What is the extent of the bedika? Zakmar beishamay amru shtei shuras. Amr Rabbi Yehuda shtei shuras amru mina aret vat shmei kara. The 2 shuras that Beis Shammai means is we're going to imagine a matrix. You have a storage full of barrels of wine. So let's say you set them up one layer of barrels, 5 deep, 5 wide. So that layer will have 25 barrels on it. You pile up another layer, another layer, another layer. If there's 5 layers of total, so then you have 5 deep, 5 wide by 5 high. Imagine that's what you have. So Rabbi Yehuda holds the 2 shuros means the first 2 walls of 5. So that would be 25 barrels, and then the 25 barrels behind it. The two walls of 5 that are closest to you are the areas where you have to be boidik for chametz. That's how Rabbi Yehuda learns the shita of Beis Shammai. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, it's shur achas kamin ge'em. It means the wall of barrels facing you that are 25 barrels, and it means the top level completely, which are 25 barrels. So the difference is going to be 5 barrels, because if it's the second shot, like Rabbi Yochanan, it's 25 barrels, which is the front face. It's the top, which is 25 barrels, but 5 barrels are included in the front face as well. So that really it's 25 plus 20, it's a total of 45 barrels. But if you learn, like Rabbi Yehuda, it's the first 2 walls of barrels. So it's actually a total of 50 barrels. Tanya Kavasa de Rabbi Yehuda. We have a brayso that supports Rabbi Yehuda, and Tanya Kavasa de Rabbi Yochanan, we have a brayso that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Tanya Kavasa de Rabbi Yehuda, Beis Shammai says, "Stay shuros al panei kol amartev." The 2 rows that Beis Shammai means is mina oretz v'achmei kaira, from the ground to the ceiling. So that would include, that would seem to be mashma that you have 2 walls of 25 barrels, one behind the other. Tanya Kavas Rabbi Yochanan, we have a brayso that indicates like Rabbi Yochanan. Stay sure al panei kol amartev chitzoina royes haPesach, the front wall that faces you when you come in through the door, the elyoina, and the top layer, which is royes hakoyer, that sees the ceiling. So that would indicate like Rabbi Yochanan shita. Shelafnim heimena v'shalamatam heimena, anything deeper in, ein tzarich bedika, does not require a bedika according to Beis Shammai. Stay sure Rav learned elyoina v'shalamat heimena. It means the top row of barrels, and it means the row of barrels right below the top row of barrels. It's the top row of barrels and the one behind it. My time of the Rav, the Rav daik chitzonis. Rav holds you have to focus on the chitzonis. So therefore, the 2 rows are going to be the rows that are in the front face that you see when you come into the market. It also says it has to be at the top. All it means to say is it's only the top 2 rows, not the 3rd row, the 4th floor, or the bottom row. Shmuel holds it's the top row of barrels in the front wall, and it's also the top row of barrels in the second wall. My timer, he's the Eikal Yonis. He holds the most important thing is they have to be the top row. It also says chitzoin in the Mishnah. It just means to say it's not the 3rd wall in or the 4th wall in. Rabbi Chia learned like Rav, but most people learn like Shmuel, the Hilchos HaKavasa the Shmuel, and we pass him like Shmuel. So we pass him like Basil, that it's only 2 rows, and the 2 rows that you're supposed to is the top row on top when you come in, and the row that's right behind it. Okay, let's stop here. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow at 6.